Hello, hi, good morning, and welcome back to another episode from Scale Up Thursday series. My name is Rashmita, and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor, Bengaluru, India. I'm here today joined by our very own host, Vinayak and Vivek, and of course, our special guest, Ashwani. But before we start today's session, I would request you all to read our code of conduct. Let me bring that in. Yes. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. Our speaker will answer all your questions during the session, so please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat section. With this, thank you all and enjoy the session. Over to you, Vivek.
Hey, thanks, Rashmita. Hi, all. This is Vivek, Senior Cloud Advocate at Microsoft. I'm going to bring in Vinayak. Hello, Vinayak. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear
Hi,
you.
everyone. My name is Vinayak Hegde, and I'm the CTO-in-residence at Microsoft for Startups. And as part of my work, I work very closely with startups and startup CTOs and CXOs, helping build their stack, choose the right technology for their stack, as well as scale their systems, as well as I help them in product strategy. I help them with various aspects of tech and product as they scale and build their team to build a world-class product. Yeah, so that's kind of my role, and I work with startups across the world. So thanks, Vivek, for having me, and looking forward to today's session. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing that today we are having one guest as well, who is from the SecOps Solutions. He's Ashwani. Hey, Ashwani, how are you?
Hey, hi Vivek. Hey Vinayak. Hi, I'm doing good. How are you
Should
guys?
should we say should we say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for you? Because I see you keep traveling in different places, right?
Yeah, we can say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone across the globe listening.
Okay, so one interesting fact, I was just talking with Ashwini just before starting this show, was he's from the background where he was developing software for flight related code base, like developing search engine for flight and other things. And interestingly, I was making some jokes there because the previous guest we had on this show was also a person who was contributing to the flight booking system and other things. So I was like, anybody who is working in these area, which is in flight specific thing, are bound to be founders.
No, that's actually
Yeah.
true. Once you pointed this out, that's when this struck me that in my own original company, right, a couple of senior guys who were also working in flights team, they also eventually ended up, starting their own. Fortunately, both of them are our customers as well. So yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right data point to look at, but definitely, yeah, this is a pattern.
Yeah, definitely. So, just to give a formal introduction, he's been amazing techie, and Ashwini has been working in security related thing from past 6 years now, 6 to 7 years, and it's amazing to see you've been working in defense and various other companies, and SecOps is almost 2 years now, right? So, which is really great. And yes, of course, we're going to discuss about that. And if you want to share, if you have some slides, can you share those slides so that we can start with the very basic question: what is DevSecops?
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm sharing the slide. Just let me know if it is visible.
Yes, we can see that.
Awesome, awesome. So I've just posted our pictures so that we get the necessary glamour quotient in. So yeah, so the what is DevSecOps, right? So this is an interesting terminology. The basic this is an abbreviation to development, security, and operations. Now that's a general definition that you can find around. But the real question is, why is there a lot of talk about DevSecops, and why are people now talking about it and trying to build this concept within their organizations? So it is an extension to what used to happens with DevOps. So previously, if you look at, this probably before 2016, 2017, when the development life cycle was longer, security teams would typically work in isolation. In a separated manner. There would be an IT security team taking care of the entire security posture of the organizations, and then there would be a DevOps team working, and working with developers and looking at after the infrastructure and building the integration around it. But since the development cycle has reduced considerably, this has got to do with a lot of different factors. One is time to market, the need to develop and push features quickly, the scalability related things. So that's when this idea of DevSecops started to develop, where what it really means is integrating security in the entire development life cycle. So involving various aspects of security right at the point where developer starts building his own applications or building its own features. And the way you do it is by automating a lot of stuff that that you will always keep on seeing. Like for example, let's say a developer is building a container, right? He is building an application, and it is Dockerized, it is containerized. So as soon as he publishes that container, before it goes to the production, or even before it goes to the UAT or a staging set, let the container image run through a security scan in an automated fashion to check for if there are any critical vulnerabilities there. If it is all right, only then go ahead and move further in the chain, where you go to the testing stage and you go ahead and deploy. So the way it helps is there is less friction between the security team and the developer. The developer immediately knows that, hey, these are some of the critical issues that I need to sort it out, because anyway this is going to come back to me at a later stage. So he is able to remediate that quickly, and in this fashion you are able to integrate infrastructure security and application security together in a more harmonious and a more synchronized manner. So that is essentially the concept of DevSecops. DevSecops is not really a tool; it is more of a methodology to integrate, to involve development and operations team together, and imbibing pieces of security at various processes, right from the starting of writing of code of the application to the deploying and beyond.
Okay. Just for understanding, um, so I have application and I have infrastructure. I might be using infrastructure as code as well, and to build the infrastructure. So you mean to say you want to make sure that the security is applied all through the process, like even managing the infrastructure to and to the the you're automating the infrastructure code to application code, and whenever you're deploying this to different state, different environments, you're making sure that you are testing this from a security perspective. You're scanning code, you're testing it for variously. Obviously you're looking for different problems with respect to infrastructure or the application or the code itself from the building the infrastructure as well. Is that right, the whole
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, precisely. So like imbibing security right at the CI/CD level stage, right? When let's say you're developing a mobile app, so identifying the vulnerabilities of the mobile app before publishing to the Play Store or to the state server, you identify security issues right at the CI/CD stage. Intelligently using common code scanning tools, or maybe even as simple as linters, right? To check for like basic security issues that could pop up in your source code. Because rather than, because this all of this will eventually come back to you. If there is a major security issue in your source code, the security team will eventually flag it out to you, but that will be at a very later stage, and then there will be a back and forth between development and security, and then the whole cycle, right? Then he changes the code, then it goes to staging, then they are testing it again, then the security checks it. So this whole cycle, just it takes a much longer time. if security is an isolated function. With DevSecops, the idea is to help make the release faster, reduce this friction, and that's why automating as much as security as possible at every stage of the deployment lifecycle.
So it's
True.
basically like a shift left in terms of the testing, right? So as software engineers, every time we push out code, I think there is risk that the software might fail, and especially if it fails not from a functionality point of view, from a security point of view, then actually the cost is even much higher, right? Both in terms of reputation, in terms of revenue loss, as well as harm to the company itself. Also, Ashwini, before I know you talked about automation, but when I talk to the security professionals, and I have a few friends who work in security as well, and when I talk to them, they keep on telling me that security is a mindset and a process, and I think DevSecops actually automates that. So maybe can you talk a little bit more about the process and what are the simple things that you can do? I mean, you talked about linters, for example, but maybe like password rotation and how do you handle PI data? Maybe talk a little bit about those aspects, where data at rest, data in transit, and data during processing as well. Maybe if you can quickly touch upon those aspects, because I want to kind of demystify this for startups in the sense that
Yeah.
some of this stuff is not actually very hard. It
Right.
actually takes a very less time, and I think the earlier you do it, the easier it is, because actually doing remedial fixes is much harder, as you talked about shift left. But even in the life of a company, not just in the life cycle of a product push, but even in the life cycle of company, I think this can be really helpful, especially I would say in highly regulated markets like fintech, healthcare,
Yeah.
insurtech. I think the bar is much higher. So yeah, over to
Right.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just want to add that one of the pushbacks that you get from developers is that due to a lot of sometimes these security policies that are implemented, it hinders their development process, and I wouldn't blame them completely for it. But so that's why companies needs to be intelligent about it. You can't just put a source code scanner in and just say that whatever it is showing, I have to literally agree to it. So that's why security folks, they talk about this that security, it's a mindset. Because you have to first understand it and put it into your environment, into your technical development structure that you are building in your company, that security is equally important. It is not just for securing your data, but later on, for this is, I'm talking about CEOs of the company. If you're looking to expand your company, right, you will have to get certain sort of compliances. It could be SOC 2 if you're selling in US, or it could be ISO 27001. If you're in regulated industry, of course you have to deal with compliances. And ensuring a lot of basic security postures are automated in your system helps you to constantly stay compliant. And that will eventually also help you grow businesses. No bigger enterprise is going to work with an organization that is that doesn't have one of these bigger certifications like SOC 2 and stuff. So that's why these practices directly also impact the businesses and helps them grow further. To get started with these things, start from very bare bone, right? Don't it's not necessary that you put in all the big security tools right at this stage. This, I'm specifically talking about startups. You don't have to bring in all the major security tools around. Just think about what are the right practices. For example, let's say you are storing username password, right? Username password details, or a PII data. So the basic idea here is that for password, you do not encrypt the password, you hash the password. Because password is something that you don't need to retrieve the data back and read in your system, right? It's just an equals to check that you have to do. So don't follow that. When you are now, this is the one question, right? Like, I'm taking an example of password. So you hash it. Now when it comes to hashing, how do I go about hashing it? So a quick Google search of checking what is the best algorithm right now for hashing. What is the most secure algorithm? Because I've seen folks, they have been using SHA-1, SHA-1 and which has been broken for a while, right? So using that is almost as good as not using hashing. So just basic presence of mind in implementing basic when you're coding and building these small features will actually help you build a much secure solution. And once these things are in place, right, when you're setting up your company, you're writing your first pieces of code, once the basic two pillars are in place, the further code which builds on top of it, it's much easier to it actually only uses these stronger pillars that were already built. So this is one of those examples. Using when you talk about API security, right? So API security in itself has emerged as an important security topic. So ensuring that you are on you're using the HTTPS. Now you don't stop at HTTPS. What is the latest and the best algorithm that's going on around now? So it is TLS 1.3 that is currently the most popular, and it's also not in beta. You also have to make sure that you're not using something that is in beta. It has a good amount of support around. So TLS 1.3 is the right SSL algorithm to use when you're building encrypted APIs on the transit. So I think it is just being slightly more aware, just doing that one extra Google search to make sure that what you're implementing, is it currently the best standard. I think that one thing, if most technical teams follow, they'll be able to cover more than 90% of what is really required, especially for startups.
Cool. Great,
So
great.
let me give you an example of why it is a mindset. Previously when there was no in GitHub, there was no we were not checking for the passwords and all those things, right? It's almost like 5 years back. It is why it is so important in the code reviews to check all of these things. It is very important, right? So basically, when we are doing code reviews, that is a mindset, right? They have everybody is as a developers, you should have that mindset to see if there are any security issues a developer is introducing into the code. And this has to driven by the whole team leaders and everyone to make sure that the team is understands the whole thing, and they drive it through the mindset, right? So that is definitely the surely a mindset thing. So let's move on to next set of things, Ashwini. Yep.
Right. So another thing I wanted to touch base on was this is this was one of the stats in 2020. On an average, an enterprise has been using 76 security tools. Now that's a big number just for security, right? For an enterprises, and this stat right here is responsible for why a lot of CISOs in the enterprises are these days chief information security officers, or even CTOs or CIOs, are talking about consolidating security tools. Because managing 76 security tools, ensuring your engineers or your security team is trained on them, it's a big hassle. So the whole idea of consolidating security tools is really catching up, and it is, I think, need of the time to do that. Another interesting trend has been that, for even a critical security vulnerability, so in security there are four levels: critical, high, medium, low. That is the general accepted standard. So critical means that it needs to be fixed immediately, because this can cause havoc in your systems. On an average, it takes 205 days to fix these kind of a vulnerability. And the reason is the amount of data that you're getting from so many different sources. It's very hard to weed out that whole data dust and identify what I need to really be fixing on. So we were seeing some of these trends, and that's how we started to think about building SecOps solution. So before I dive into what SecOps solution does, let me just give you a brief background about the team, and then I'll tell you why this team is equipped to tackle this problem. So one of the problems, so let me just first talk about the problem statement here. So there were three major pain points that we saw. One was vulnerability management, like ensuring how are you identifying vulnerabilities in the various tech stack that you may have. So when I say tech stack, I mean your infra, your servers, your containers, Kubernetes pods, network devices, applications, so mobile apps, web apps. So constantly identifying and monitoring these problems with 76 security tools is a big pain point for most most enterprises. And the bigger problem is, how do you prioritize what you need to focus on? Because currently prioritizing what needs to be patched is a very manual process, right? And the second was misconfiguration. So misconfiguration in applications is one of the most common reasons why data theft occurs, or malicious actor gets into your system. In fact, very recently, just couple of weeks back, the Uber data breach, right? It was also a simple because of which Uber almost got hacked completely. Like everything in Uber was accessible to this bad actor, and it was again because of a simple misconfiguration in their system, right? So misconfiguration is actually a very big pain point. And there was no way to forecast attacks, to identify whether, how can a bad actor get into my system. There is very little visibility or any solution around it to give you a visibility on how can a bad guy enter into your system. So why SecOps is equipped to solve this problem. So I have been building security products for past 6 years. I was with Deepfence, which was into microservice security at that point in time. I have been leading security at Versa Networks. I've worked with some of the consultants. I decided to drop out of Carnegie Mellon to build SecOps Solution with my team. Our team comprises of like security researchers, developers, who have proven track records and have great experience working in cloud security, BFSI sector, even logistic tech security in that space. So that's a little just about what our team does. And what did we end up building? So SecOps Solution, it's a completely agentless platform. Now, what is agentless? Agentless means that no software is constantly sitting in your system and running. So think of it like an antivirus, right? So that folks must be using when they were using their Windows laptop. I'm sure everybody has used a Windows OS once in their life. So an antivirus constantly sits in your system to monitor all of this. Now, if you do this for production servers, the problem is this agent or this software is constantly sucking the resources, the CPU and the memory resources in your server. And of course, there is a black box software running in your system, which itself is a security loophole. You are allowing to something else to run in your system, which you have absolutely no idea what it is built of or what kind of data it is extracting. So what we decided to do was build a completely agentless solution, wherein we do not sit inside the infra of the customer. We are able to perform the entire security assessment of their infrastructure from the outside, without sitting inside their system and consuming their resources. Then the next additional thing that we added, which is also the USP of our product, is context-based risk prioritization. So vulnerability prioritization, which I talked about in one of my previous slides, is actually a big problem for most customers. Because what happens is when you run these automated vulnerability scans, right? So this could be a code scanner, this could be a vulnerability scan on your servers or on your applications. The amount of data that is generated is huge, and it is almost impossible to patch all the vulnerabilities. So you have to identify what is really critical, what can actually get exploited in your system. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a vulnerability in your website, and it is critical as per OWASP. OWASP is a global standard, which for security. It's a non-for-profit organization, and they have done some amazing contribution to the field of security. A lot of security vendors and even CISOs follow OWASP standards. So yeah, so that's just about OWASP. For those who are interested in, should definitely check it out. It's OWASP. So let's say there is a critical vulnerability as per OWASP. OWASP says that this let's say broken broken authorization is one of the critical vulnerability. But that vulnerability can only be exploited if your website is internet facing, and let's say in your case it's not. It's behind the VPN. Only few admin folks are using it. So because of your deployment scenario, this vulnerability may never get exploited, because this can only get exploited if you're internet facing and you are not. So now, although OWASP says this is critical, it is not critical for you. So you and your team need not be spending time fixing this, because it will never get exploited for you. So this is the kind of insight that SecOps is able to provide, and which we are calling context-based risk prioritization, where our platform tries to understand the context on how your application is deployed, how it is interacting within your infra and with the outside network, and then tell you whether, is this a vulnerability that you need to focus on, or whether you can, skip it. And then, of course, identifying cyber attack chain. Can we figure out a way on how an outside attacker can get into my system and exploit it? Can we build that map? Can we build those arrows on how someone gets into the system? So these are the three essence of what SecOps does. Our typical product flow works like this. We The user performs an automated infra scan through our platform. He also performs an automated application scan. All of this data goes through our internal rule engine, and then it spits out what are the most critical security risks and what is the cyber attack chain that has been identified. Of course, we also provide individual security results as well in addition to this one. So yeah, so coming to the meat of the things, right? So SecOps architecture. So how does our architecture work? So
Ashwini,
this
can you just go back to the previous slide?
sure.
So the product flow is like this, right? There is a user and there is a infrastructure scanning and your application scanning,
Yeah.
and then you run AI. It's based on AI is where you give them the input to the customers that this is where you can focus on, and this is where you should be focusing on fixing these things, and that is the exact model you're using, right? This is the structure.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So both of the scanners are also built by us. So these scanners are built by us, and then this is fed into model and onto the top of the rule engine. So the final output is eventually comes out of rule engine, because ML is slightly a black box. So we cannot rely, because it's a critical information that we are providing. So we are okay giving false positives, but false negative is something we have to be extremely wary of, especially in security.
So Ashwini, so can you talk? I want you to double click on the central box, which is ML model and rule engine. Uh, so I want to know what are the kind of signals that you kind of that is the input. Like obviously we talked a little bit about, but I just want to kind of double click on what are the kind of inputs that you look at. Do you take inputs from other kind of threat detection engines?
Yeah.
Obviously you have your own scanning, but like what are the inputs like from your own scanning and from other third party tools? What can you integrate to actually make that rule engine and ML model better, right? Because again, like the more data or the more relevant data that you have, I think the better the engine is. So I just wanted to focus a little more on the inputs before we kind of move to the second part of the equation, which is like the processing and eventually the output, in which you get like a rank vulnerability list which needs to be fixed. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, certainly. So from data feed perspective, we have a separate feed that we get from like 50 various different sources. Some of them are open source, some of them are commercial feeds, which are also like thread feeds, right? From where we are constantly updating our own central database for any of the new vulnerabilities that has been identified. And we update we do this update quite frequently, like every single hour. Most of these databases are updated. The reason it is important to do this quickly is the amount of vulnerabilities that are identified, right, is humongous. Almost every day, more than 300 to 500 vulnerabilities are getting reported. So that's why it's important to constantly keep a track of it. The signals that we take in are right from like security issues right inside your server, the operating system versions, the third party libraries that you may have installed. So vulnerabilities associated with that. How is your server deployed, right? So that is another point. Like, is it a public facing server? Is it behind a DMZ? What kind of port access does it have? Let's say, for example, a Redis is running on a server, right? So if that Redis port, is it like public facing port, or is it just internal? It's not open to public, and it's just running inside as a caching mechanism. For application scanning, again, whether it is, first of all, is it a web application or a mobile application? We also try to build a context here. Like we will ask you, like if any of the server that you have already scanned, can you let us know if any of this server is holding any of these web application that you're about to scan, so that we are able to connect properly that this web application is using this particular server, is actually deployed on this kind of a server. Then when it comes to web application, what kind of web application it is, domain is also an important aspect here. Domain and the region, by region I mean where your customer, most customer segment is, because the kind of there has been a pattern into the kind of attacks that occur where the customer base is primarily US, or a customer base is, for example, Asia. There is a certain pattern to it. So the region where your customer base is, or the domain that you are in, like for example financial services, or for example health tech. So there is again a pattern to it. For example, health tech, they tend to, health tech or pharma, they tend to use a lot of Windows systems, because they are running a lot of other analytic software on top of it. And these analytic software are generally not built for Linux systems. They are more GUI based, so they prefer to run it on Windows. So because it's a healthcare domain, so you already know this info that these guys would be using more Windows system. So you tune your model accordingly, so that you are more focused on those kind of particular vulnerabilities. In pharma, some of these analytic software are extremely expensive and very sophisticated, and they have their own unique requirements. So those are some of the parameters that also get fed into our engine to fetch you those details.
Great. I think we can. Vivek, do you have any other questions, or we can move on to the next slide where we
Yeah,
dive
we
deeper
can
into?
move on to the architecture. Yeah, giving
Yeah.
the time we have.
Yeah, sure. So, with regards to architecture, I thought of covering SecOps in two ways. This architecture talks about how SecOps internally works, how the network flow works, and how are we handling so many scans and load on our system. I'll just give you a quick glimpse, and then I'll come back. This is how SecOps communicates with our target scan systems that we want to scan. So there are a lot of servers that are behind a DMZ, or behind a VPN, which are private servers. So how is SecOps able to reach out to them in an agentless fashion? So we'll come back to that later. So coming first to the architecture bit, right? So it is like the usual pretty standard way. The user comes, there is an application traffic that goes through HTTPS. There is a load balancer in place. We are a multi-cloud platform. We use Azure heavily for both our production deployment, and a lot of Azure for actually our security labs that we have built there, because our researchers, they keep on testing for various different new vulnerabilities, new sets of payloads, new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. So in fact, our lab requirements are much more intensive than, I would say, eventually where our product gets deployed and offering to the customers. So once it goes to the application servers, this is local zone. So we because we have to comply with the data localization policy, which almost now every country has mandated. We have separate instances for different regions. Like for example, for our Indian customers, there's a separate instance here in India, so all the entire data sits in India. For the US customer, there's a separate instance. In the US, the entire data and every communication that happens with the instance that is sitting in the US. So of course, that's why we went with multi-cloud approach rather than going for private data centers, because managing this becomes extremely efficient for us, especially at this stage. We have a very simple caching mechanism. Our backend, our core scanners, which that we require to be heavily optimized on CPU and memory front. We have built it using Golang and C in some places where we needed to be very memory efficient. Otherwise, our front end and back end is built off Angular and Python. Some of the sensitive data that we sometimes store of users, almost all the reports, because all of these are eventually security reports that we store, right? These are essential security vulnerabilities of a company. So they are actually quite a confidential data. So all of these reports are encrypted and stored through various mechanisms. And our rule engine is again hosted in a separate box, so as to handle the load that's coming in. So we try to separate it out, because having both, initially we had both of them in one place, but then it just was not convenient. It was not able to handle. We did not want to go into the vertical scaling kind of a system, so we decided to spread it out. So yeah, that's how the basic architecture works around it. Yeah, any
How,
questions on this one?
yeah. So when you create the report,
Yeah.
so report is generated. You want to store this report. Do you encrypt the report while in transit, and also at the rest, or you would just push it to the storage and then have it encrypted at the rest? What
Yeah,
is
no,
the strategy you have?
it is encrypted at the rest, because if it eventually comes at our end, then during this whole process, it's readable, so we encrypt it at the rest, and that data is then stored into the database.
But what about the transit? So you create the
Hmm.
generate a report somewhere,
Right.
and you need to
Right.
push that data to the storage,
Yeah.
because since data is moving through a network,
Right.
do you encrypt in the transit as well?
Yeah, so we all our APIs, right? So they're running on HTTPS, TLS 1.3. So it is encrypted on rest, and then the eventual report itself is also encrypted. So the network is encrypted, of course, but the final report itself is also encrypted, so we are not storing it in a clear text format.
Okay. Is there an option for customers to store the reports in their own storages instead of pushing it to you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So especially for companies that are under regulated sector, so they in fact want a complete, like an on-prem kind of a solution. So in those cases we do the complete deployment at their end, including our application and everything. So at that point the entire data sits in the customer space, because for financial services or health tech or insure tech, they sometimes tend to avoid cloud solutions. So at that point we do the on-prem installation. Yeah, but if it is for SaaS, then the data sits with us.
Okay.
Okay.
So the
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Vinayak.
so in terms of the database, can you repeat like what database do you use? I might miss that in the early conversation.
Yeah, so we have like a master slave configuration of Postgres, so with like a couple of replicas there. So yeah, we use a
Do you
Postgres
use a
configuration.
PaaS? Do you use the PaaS solution, or do you run it on the VMs yourselves? How is it?
So we currently run it on our VMs itself, because we don't need PaaS at this point in time. So the way we went about building SecOps was, we wanted to keep the tech layer as slim as possible, and only add layers when absolutely needed, right? Like, in fact, I would even recommend that folks who are building, although it's always the right strategy to use, for example, an ORM when you are talking to a database. Just understand the reason why you're using ORM, and I think that's when you'll be able to make a better judgment. And I think with Postgres, we'll be able to handle much of the traffic. So that was the reason we went ahead with Postgres. Another thought was, I was listening to a CTO of Zerodha. I'm not able to recollect the name. And he mentioned that Zerodha is completely on Postgres, and I'm like, if that is the kind of traffic that they can handle, we certainly can go by using Postgres for good amount of time.
Yeah, Kailash Nath. Yeah,
Kailash, yeah, sorry, Kailash. Yeah, I just yeah, I was not able to recollect. Yeah.
no worries, no worries. So I also wanted to kind of double click on Azure Key Vault, right? That's a kind
Yeah.
of a critical component that you have. Can you talk about that usage also a little bit more? Like what kind of data goes in, and how do you retrieve, and do you do any kind of rotations, as well as uh, security practices around credentials, maybe a little bit more? How hard, how easy? I just want to kind of double click on that part as well.
Yeah, sure. So Azure Key Vault, yeah, of course, key rotation is what we do. In our case, what we went with was the absolute documentation that Azure Key Vault had, and which was quite good. for us. So we followed all their best practices. So the communication through them is through this through the API, and the key rotation happens. It is specifically used for storing the very sensitive data. Some of the credentials that we store, credentials for that we use internally to communicate with our internal systems, and also sometimes the customer credentials as well. So those are the few things that we store there.
Great.
And there were also a couple of reasons. One is, of course, you want to have a dedicated service that is taking care of these credentials rather than us reinventing the wheel, because we are not cryptography experts, right? So we do not want to do that. And also, I think from a customer standpoint, it also gives them the confidence that if you're using a established solution meant only for storing this kind of a data, it gives them the confidence that my data is stored in the right manner.
Cool. So I want to talk about a little bit about the ML model and rule generated training. But before that, I just wanted to kind of highlight and also maybe get your thoughts on the deployment model. I think we talked about it briefly. Like currently,
Yeah.
so you have three ways of deployment. I mean, you could deploy it on your own cloud, which is
Yeah.
a part of the infra, and then you test the customer's infra. Right, that is one mode. The second mode is you can deploy in the customer's private cloud, or as in Azure, you have subscriptions, right? So you can deploy in the customer's subscription, and then everything runs on the cloud, but in the customer's subscription. And the third one is actually you can run the entire thing in on-prem, where it runs in the customer's data center, which is like off cloud, but still in the server farm, right?
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are the three ways where we deploy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next question, right? How do you deploy updates, right? Because I mean, deploying once, I mean, it has its own complexity, but how do you do upgrades in each of these scenario? Do you have a system for that? If you can kind of walk us through that, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So for updates, it's a pretty simple structure that we have one instance that that is like our main source of truth. And wherever, like in on-prem, so for SaaS it's pretty straightforward, right? We fetch data from this one instance where we have the most updated databases and most updated releases. For on-prem, it's a little complex. So the way we work with them is in two manners. One is if they can allow or whitelist our update API, right? So our on-prem installation will constantly listen for any of the updates from our main update center. If there is any new updates, it will be able to fetch it from there. So whitelisting is one of those things. If that is also not possible, so in that case we have to manually go ahead and update. So we schedule manual updates with them. So we get a downtime or a slot with them for 1 hour or so, and that's when the engineer has to update it manually. So currently that is the structure in which we are updating.
Cool. And do you have maybe like alpha beta channels, like for like production testing? Do you have that kind of arrangement with certain customers?
Yeah, so internally, like we have two different setups. Like, of course, there are like two staging setups that we have for different use cases, and then there is, of course, a production system for our customers. If when they just want to try out the product or just want to just play around, so we give them a demo instance of our solution for that, which has, of course, limited, like it has full functionalities but limited access to them to make changes, and they are able to play around with our demo instance.
So this is in your staging, right?
Yeah, so demo instance is different that we give to customers if they want to play around. Internally, we have two staging
Okay.
setups used by our developers, and developers have full access to it because they keep on making changes. And for quick testing purposes, I think that is the ownership that they need. The production sits with only the senior most engineer. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's maybe move a little bit to the right hand side of the diagram, right, which is like the ML model and tooling. Can you tell us the entire like ML ops scenario, right? Like getting data, maybe preparing it, for consumption, then finally training, and then cross validation, uh, building the model, and finally, like pushing the model for inference. Can you just walk us through that process? How do you manage it, and how do you update it?
Yeah, right, sure. The main important piece here is that our main production system only interacts with the the final model that has already been deployed. We have kept the model development and updation part as a completely separate instance that doesn't interact with the production system directly. The production is always interacting with the latest ML model that has already been developed and the rule engine that has already been freezed, right? So the ML research or ML development, whatever happens separately. That's where our engineers they are constantly collating data, collecting data. So we collect data on what is only around the necessary parameters that we need to update our ML models. We primarily rely on supervised learning there, because we feel that is one of the most accurate data predictions that that you can get. Unsupervised learning in theory is great, but I am not sure how valuable it is when it comes to practical production deployment scenarios. So that is a separate ML. The development happens in a separate instance in a fashion.
Cool.
So which
Maybe
product do
maybe
you
we can talk a
use?
little bit more.
Yeah, go ahead, Vinayak. We can't hear you.
Am I audible?
No, I can hear you, Ashwini. I
Okay.
think Vinayak. So, anyways, I was just asking which products do you use to host all of these ML models? Are you using Azure to keep all of these data for ML model building and all those things? Like, which are the services you use?
All right. So we are on a multi-cloud setup, and we are also part of NVIDIA's Inception program. So we get some of the necessary hardware, GPU hardware that we require from them as well.
Okay, got it. Yeah, you, Vinayak, we have lost you there. Like, you had some question.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear.
Yeah. So I was just saying that yeah, we can move on to the next slide unless there are any questions, because we can go deeper dive into the the architecture on the scanning side.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just for Ashwini, just for the audience, right? Could you explain what is DMZ? Not everybody would know what it is.
Right. So yeah. So DMZ, I think the term has been taken from the military side of things. But what in our network scheme of things, what it means is it is the servers that are behind a particular a private subnet, right? That are not publicly exposed. That are internal servers. This could be servers. This could be network devices, endpoints. Basically, they are not exposed to the public internet. So now for so this has been an interesting problem for us, right? A SaaS solution has to perform vulnerability assessment and scanning for servers that are not on the internet, that are not public facing. So how do you do that, and how do you do that in an agentless fashion? The reason we wanted to go agentless was, if you start putting software into each of these private target servers, and then you are say the easiest solution is maybe you just allow these IPs, but then that's actually adding additional security vulnerability into your system, because you initially wanted it to be a private server, and now then you're suddenly allowing some of the APIs or IPs from the internet to directly interact over it. So that was one of the big challenges for us. So the way we went about it is we thought, hey, how are companies accessing these private servers when they want to deploy it, right? So every company has a jump server with them, or a bastion, like interchangeable names, it means the same thing. So what we do is we install a small, a very lightweight middleware on this jump server. So once that is installed, that middleware is able to access all the internal private servers. Similarly, in a fashion where the user within the company would use this private server, they will go to their jump server and then get into login into these internal private servers. Similarly, we have built our own small middleware, and the way the connection flows is user initiates, let's say, hey, I want to run scan on this particular private target server. So user initiates an action at our UI. the UI first goes to the jump server. The UI already knows where the jump server is for this particular IP. So it goes to the jump server. The jump server then our daemon commands the jump server that, hey, I want to go and get into this server and perform the assessment. So the scan is done there. The results are retrieved back, and then finally the reports are visible to the customer. So this was one of the interesting scenarios that where we had to develop our solution was, as and when we are because network configuration is an interesting thing, right? There are so many different permutation and combinations possible that it is an area that we are also constantly learning with our customers. One of the examples I would like to give is, recently we were working with a customer where he had an interesting scenario where he said, I have a jump server, but then you will not be able to access my target server directly. Through that jump server, you have to get into another jump server, and through that jump server you will be able to get into the target server. Now, can you build this kind of a can your solution get me through these two levels in to perform the scan? So that is a new challenge that we recently got. So we are currently working on building it. Of course, technically it's possible, but yeah, that is the interesting part of what we work. The amount of network configurations are so different and unique that there are always these different cases that keeps on coming up, and that we have to go back to the drawing board to think what is that additional thing that we can do to help our customer and cover their edge case. So this is how this whole communication works.
So this is basically for these customers where you're deploying it for on-prem or deploying it in their own network, right? This whole setup you do. Otherwise, they will directly connect to your SaaS, and they'll be able
Yeah.
to get the data and get the report.
So this is also for customers who want to use my SaaS but want to scan their internal servers, their private servers. So for them, this kind of a setup works. In fact, for on-prem, usually wherever our solution is deployed, it directly has access to all the internal systems, right? So
Okay.
there, actually, this kind of a problem doesn't occur. This mostly happens when they are looking to use our SaaS solution but wants us to scan their servers that are not on internet.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah,
We can go
any
on to next if you have no questions, right, Vinayak?
No, we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a little of our customers, Tata Hitachi, some of our customers that have been using our platform for performing security vulnerabilities. I did mention about Inception, NVIDIA's Inception program, right? They're also part of Microsoft for Startups, of course. That has been born. Upekha is one of the accelerators that we are part of. They are also an investor at SecOps. DSCI is one of the most popular organization in India for cybersecurity. So we are very happy to be associated with them as well. I think it's time for a quick demo. So if we have some time, I can just walk through the demo quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
sure.
have. We
Yeah.
definitely have 10 minutes. No worries.
Sure. So yeah, so this is what the typical platform looks like. This is like the final dashboard of the platform that you see. When you have performed the scans, that's when all of these details pop up here. I'll come back to this end. That's when it'll be more clear. It'll make more sense. Let me just walk you through some of the individual pieces first. So we are covering full stack, right? So we take care of your mobile app security, your web application security. On the infrastructure side, we look after vulnerability management of your servers, network devices. There is a separate module just for containers and container security, which is again becoming an important part, especially when people are using microservices and building DevSecops lifecycle around it, and also the configuration management part. So this is where users can come up and add their servers to the platform. They simply mention the name of the machine, the IP address. We support all major operating systems. So let's say I select Ubuntu, for example. So all the versions, right, from 12 to 21, now adding support for 22 as well. This is one of the parameters that you were asking, right? What goes into ML? So one of the parameters is what kind of server it is. It is a production server, development, or a staging, right? This also helps me prioritize certain vulnerabilities for you. You can perform authenticated scan if you want, so you can provide us with authentication credentials. If you don't want to do that, you want to perform black box, then you can do that as well. You can do a bulk upload as well. So adding a lot of servers in one go. Just simply download our template, fill up the details, and upload it back. So let me walk you through the first feature, which is vulnerability management. So what this does is basically look for vulnerabilities inside your server's operating system, as well as third-party libraries, databases. This could be a Log4j, Python, Ruby on Rails, any random port is running or a bad service is running, all of that. To start a scan, simply select the IP that you want to run a scan on or a CIDR range. I'll do an OS scan for now, and I'll just click on start scan. This scan happens completely in an agentless fashion. Our scanners are one of the fastest in the industry. Our databases also, as I mentioned, get updated very frequently, and it will check for any vulnerability. Some random port is running, if some malicious services are running, so it will be able to check for all of those things. Currently, like I have a server in Azure that is sitting. So, and as you can see, the scan is finished as well. So meanwhile, I was talking, the scan is able to finish. So we provide reports in three structure: PDF, CSV, JSON. I would like to go in details into the reports, but I think that will bore the audience, so I would skip that.
So,
Yeah.
quickly, I had a question here, Ashwini. So you talked about the OS level scan and also application scan. So, uh, what kind of languages and frameworks do you support? Because again, like you have everything from PHP to Ruby to Rust. I think
Right.
the kind of languages we have is quite large, right? So,
Right.
any inputs on what kind of coverage you have for different languages and frameworks as well?
Right. So for infra, pretty much like OS is the main part for us. So we support almost all the major OSs in Linux, Windows, network devices. For the application front in mobile, if I talk about like mobile application, we currently support Android apps. So the Android app could be built in Kotlin, Java, any of those languages, and iOS. So iOS, I think Swift is the most common language. You also have a support for Objective C. In web application, our more focus is on identifying different injection attacks. So all the popular frameworks that are built around it, like ASP.NET or a PHP, or could be React or Angular JS, right? So we look for that. So language becomes only important for us when we want to execute a payload to make sure that to check whether certain injection attack or a certain vulnerability is possible into the system. So that we have a bunch of different payloads, there's a library for it. So based on whatever framework the website is, that the language the payload execute itself. So it is not really dependent on the it doesn't make or break if you have something very niche language or a niche framework that you're using. That question becomes more valid if you're looking for something like a source code scanning, right? So that's when you might look at, okay, is this source code scanner supported for Java, or is it for PHP, and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was around vulnerability management. Container security basically looks for vulnerabilities in your container images or running instance of a container. So that is called dynamic container scanning. Again, to start a scan, you simply select the IP. It automatically fetches what all images that are sitting in your server. Currently I have an Nginx, so I click on Nginx, click on start scan, and it will give me detailed vulnerability reports. On the application side, web application security, you just simply select the URL that you want to run a scan on. There are two scan modes we have. Fast scan will do baseline assessment. Full scan will check for everything, all the popular standards around application security like OWASP, SANS Top 25, WASC, all of that. You can perform authenticated scan. So basically, this helps us mimic as real users into our system, so that we are able to access the APIs that are only accessible post authentication. So you can provide us with authentication credentials to start scan. One of the things that we have taken care of is our scanners don't put any load on the end infra or on the end application. So you can run because one of the problems with security scanners is that sometimes they end up bogging down the application, putting it too many post requests, right? So that is something we have taken care of. In fact, our infra scanners require only 0.1% of the CPU, that too also for 30 to 45 seconds only when running the scans. Mobile app sec, it's again pretty straightforward. You simply upload your APK file or a .ipa file and just click on start scan. To enable DevSecops lifecycle, we have extended all these features over APIs. So developers can plug. Let's say a developer is building his mobile app. He can plug our mobile scanner into his CI/CD pipeline. So as soon as he has built his APK, he can call our mobile app scan API right into his CI/CD pipeline, run the scan, and check if there is any vulnerability. If not, great, go ahead and publish it. If any critical or a high vulnerability is found, he can fix it and then go ahead and publish it. We have few
This is
integrations with.
fantastic, actually.
Yeah,
This
sorry.
is fantastic because then it becomes part of the process and not like and somebody does not have to manually trigger that. So it takes out human intervention completely out, right? When you have this API thing,
Yeah,
and also as we talked about shift left at the beginning of the webinar, and I think this is like a classic example of shift left where you kind of do all the security testing right at the beginning in a very unobtrusive way, right? Yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
great. Great that you can do this through APIs.
Right, so that is you can plug it into that part, and then if you like if you want to also integrate into your workflow management. So let's say if you are using ticketing solution like Jira, right? So right from the platform here itself, you can start assigning issues. So let's say I want to assign all critical vulnerabilities to Vinayak, for example, as so he can start creating issues right from the platform here itself. So this way, for the CISOs and the CTOs, they can have a workflow management right into the platform to observe when this issue was found out, who is working on fixing it, and when was this patched. So this helps them monitor and manage security issues. And
So this
now
will,
one, yeah.
sorry, one question I quickly had was this will typically get assigned to people in DevOps team or developers or could be any of those.
Yeah, so it depends upon the kind of vulnerability. Like for example, yeah, let's say there is a vulnerability in your let's say you're using Node 10, right? Node.js version 10, and there is a vulnerability in Node.js 10, and the only patch is to upgrade it to Node 11. So now this is actually the responsibility of the developer to make sure his application is compatible with Node 11, because in most cases it won't be. He'll have to make certain changes. So this
Right.
becomes a responsibility of the developer. But let's say in infra, let's say you have some random library that is sitting with a critical vulnerability inside your
Or
system.
Nginx, for example, or Nginx, for example, right? Could be
Yeah,
there's a
yeah. So
vulnerability with Nginx or some infra component that is maybe
right,
routing traffic for you, for
right,
example. Yeah. Then it
exactly,
will
exactly.
be DevOps, yeah.
Yeah, that will be into DevOps. Yeah. So
Okay,
that's why
got it.
it's a very integrated functionality, because both of them are involved at different stages, right? And once all of these scans are done, right, and I have given you these individual reports, so all the individual reports are already available. That's when we try to do is collate this entire data and try to identify what are the most critical security risks in the user space. So we help you identify the most critical vulnerabilities there. I'll not be able to show you the data because some of the data is yet to be patched, so apologies for that. Maybe I should have checked out the other account. But yeah, this I just remembered that this data, some of the vulnerabilities are related to customers, so I can't show that. But yeah, so this is what the basic the structure of the product looks like, and this is what the small utility is. So this tells you where are your assets located, and if your assets are listed as malware, or if they are blacklisted in any of the prominent lists that are being maintained, so we flag that out as well. Like, where are your application located? If they are blacklisted, we'll flag that out as well. So yeah, so this is a little gist of what SecOps solution does. Yeah.
Where do you get
So,
this
so
data
how
from?
Yeah,
The
so we
flagging.
get it from, yeah, so we fetch it from various databases who keeps this data about there is this big repository of these are the IP addresses that are listed as malware. So popularly these IPs are also used for crypto mining, right? So they blacklist it. So we fetch from these sources.
So how much time does it take if I have to induce this report? Uh,
Hmm.
I'm calling all these APIs while in one of the stage of the CI/CD pipeline, right? So I have my application. I push the code, and the CI runs, and you run all these security checks. Like how much time it would take to get to the report?
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good question. So for infra, it's quite fast. So infras typically takes about 30 seconds to 1 minute for a server. If it's a really large server, it may go up to two minutes. For application, it's really dependent on the size of the application. If I have a small calculator app, the scan will be quick. If I have a PUBG, for example, or a gaming app, so that would take a big time, because the size of the mobile application, and same goes for web application. So it really depends upon the kind of application, so it's hard to put a number on that.
And how does it work in a microservice environment? I'm just thinking like I have
Yeah.
bunch of services. I push the code every, all the services I push the code together, and there might be one service which is all good, but the other service might be a dependent service, might not have the vulnerability. Are you connecting that and basically building any kind of reports there, or how does it look? I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like, how does it work in the scenarios
Right.
like
So
this?
for microservices, again, there are two parts to it. One is the, let's say, container image, right? So one is checking vulnerabilities in the container image. So that you can do right out of your Docker repository, for example, or you're building Docker image in your CI/CD pipeline. So again, you call my container scanning API and you run a scan on it to find vulnerabilities. The next part is looking for vulnerabilities in a running instance of a container or a running instance of a Kubernetes pod. Why that is crucial is because although maybe your image is good, but this container is interacting over network. So it is maybe downloading some sort of payload, maybe getting some sort of update or throwing some data. So that's why you want to look for vulnerabilities there. So that is where you can monitor your container vulnerabilities through the UI app again that we have.
Perfect, perfect. So there are a couple of, I think, one or two questions coming in, and for the audience, if you have any questions, please post the questions in the chat. One question which is from Koteshwar Rao. He was our, I think, previous episodes guest. His question is basically: is there any way your customers can play around? Like, you have any kind of link where they can test all of these things and try all of these things?
Yeah, so thanks for reaching out, Koteshwar. So maybe you can schedule a demo call on our website, so we can just give you a quick walkthrough, and post that we can create a demo instance for you there.
I think this question will be for Vinayak. I believe this question is on like they're building a cyber security startup and they're looking for mentorship, and they are first time founders and they really want some kind of expert guidance. I do feel that, I mean, from my perspective, I just want to answer before hand this question to Vinayak. It's basically you can apply for Founders Hub. There is mentorship program, right, Vinayak?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. So I would say, I mean, there's a ticker running at the bottom, of the YouTube. So sign up for Founders Hub. We have a mentorship program that you can do, but in addition to mentorship, we have various levels of technical support. We help you on architecture. I also work with closely with startups to make sure that they're scalable, and we also, in addition to the mentorship which we have and the technical support we have, we have you will have access to people inside Microsoft, because Microsoft also is building security products. So we have a large cyber security team. In fact, we have a complete business division that has 50 plus products in their suite. So definitely, I think we can connect you with the right experts both internally and through our network. And also, and the third part is obviously the product support, and in terms of scaling and building your internal architecture. So we all kinds of support once you are part of the uh, founders up program.
Great.
And
I think
especially like, I mean, and this is really useful, right, for especially first time founders or underrepresented founders who do not have a network of their own. I think we act as a extended kind of network where we can actually really help you connect with and build those links, because again, like, we want to kind of reduce the barriers to entry for a lot of entrepreneurs who are either building for the first time or you come from underrepresented backgrounds. In India, it could be possibly from tier 2 cities, or you are a female founder, so maybe you do not have a lot of connects in the tech ecosystem, for example. So there are various ways in which we can help you. I mean, mentorship, just to reiterate, mentorship network again, internal Microsoft resources that we have both in terms of technical documentation, know-how, and people. And third is product support in terms of scaling, in terms of looking at the right resources.
perfect. Uh, is there any other questions from the audience? While we are waiting for that, as Vinayak mentioned, you can go back and apply for Founders Hub, and there is a way where you can provide the reference email ID, and that's the reference email ID which we have provided, which is our show name, scaleupthursday@microsoft.com, and you can apply it with the reference email ID. And also, we have, if you're early stage startup, we also have a very good learn path, and you can go through this link which is scrolling down. Right, there is a nice learn path on building early stage startup. It's about fundraising, how to do the pitch, and a lot of other things which is there in that specific learn module. So you can also go through that. So we can wait for 2 more minutes or 1 minute for any questions to come in. If not, you know
Yeah.
thank
So
you,
while we're
thank you,
waiting,
Ashwini. Yeah,
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 while
Vinayak.
we're waiting for question, I think one more plug. I would say for two more things. One is actually we do not just do technical mentorship; we also do business mentorship. So, and you mentioned the learn module. So we do help founders in kind of skilling them in terms of branding, in terms of fundraising, and GTM. So we have programs that address the business part of it. So typically in a startup, you have people who are builders and who people who are actually selling to customers. So we actually cater to both sides of the startup. So it's a fairly comprehensive program. And also Ashwini, I just noticed that you have integration with Jira, and one of the feature requests I would have is like integration with GitHub as well. So very happy to have you actually connect with the GitHub team also internally if you're looking for any help. Yeah. So yeah, so I wanted to kind of talk about that, and also as part of a platform we have GitHub benefits also. So we can you can kind of redeem those benefits as well.
Certainly would love to connect with the team and would love to work on this one. Yeah.
Yep. So there is one more question, Ashwini. I think this is for you. Like,
Okay.
what is the hardest period, particularly growing from the idea to an MVP?
I think I would ideally say building the product was the simplest part and the most enjoyable part for me, because I'm an engineer, so I like building stuff. Post that is really hard finding the market, but from idea to MVP, I think it is taking that plunge. That I'll because we are software engineers, right? So we get there's a plethora of opportunities around. So taking that plunge into going in and building your product, I think that is the mindset shift is the important part. But like from my limited experience, whatever I've had, I feel uh, after MVP, whatever happens is the harder part.
I think the hardest decision you would have taken is to drop out from a university to build this
The
stuff.
hard, it was actually difficult to convince my parents, right? Because when I was in undergrad, so I would be like, CMU is one of the best institutes for security, and now these guys are like, this guy is crazy. He has got an admit, and he is now not pursuing it full time. So I think that was a part, but now I think they're okay with it.
Perfect.
Personally
So
also,
cool.
yeah, personally also being having been a former founder myself, I think the hardest part, and I think Ashwin, you can probably add to that, is finding the first few customers is like convincing them that a product is like worth using is also like the hardest part, right? I think once you get the first few customers and then you have a reference, you have a little bit of confidence having done that. But getting other than the act of starting up and building the product, which I think being on the technical side slightly easier for us. But I think getting those first few customers is like typically very tricky. So you have to work your network, or get those first few customers, and then I think then there is some amount of momentum when you go to MVP. And obviously MVP comes with its own set of challenges in terms of growth. But I think that first is the step itself of starting up, and the second one is I think probably getting the first few convincing the first few customers to use your product and pay you, more importantly. I
Yeah.
think that is the toughest part. Yeah.
That is so true. And
Um,
also, like, I think for us as an engineer, it's a mindset shift. Because we have been only building products. We never actually got involved too much in the sales part of it. and now your entire
Right.
business actually depends upon the sales. Like product is a
Right.
way a company is built on sale. So I think that whole learning curve is quite interesting. It takes its own sweet time. I'm still sure I have a lot to learn. I'm still in the early stage, but yeah, I think once that learning, I think mindset shift is done. I think and once you get those first few customers, then the boost that you get, that I think, yeah, this can work. What I'm building makes some sense, and I've not built it just because I'm an engineer, and I like building stuff. I think that is very valuable, and that's a great confidence booster for you as a founder and your team as well.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, true. Perfect. So yeah, Ashwini, thanks for coming on the show and sharing all of these insights. It was wonderful chat, and we learned so many things. And of course, the audience were interested in a lot of other things as well. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vinayak. Thank you, Rashmita. We'll come back again. We have a couple of more lined up for next month, and for this month, we are doing some tech sessions as well. So please do join in the chat. Links are there in the chat. Please take it up. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Vivek, Vinayak, and Rashmita. It was pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye, everyone.